All right, so now let's do the planning. So let's just recap the entire thing just so that we are on the same page. So this application that we are building shortly will be used to shorten long URLs. The way it's going to work is that any user will, obviously not any user, only the ones which are authenticated, for which they'll have to sign up, they can visit our application and they can do this thing. They can shorten long URLs, which in the end just gives them a shortened link, something like this. I don't think this domain is available, but let's just assume it has something like this. So when anyone visits this link, they will be redirected to the original link, the long one. So that's what this application is about. Now let's plan let's do the data modeling. So as of now, there's one thing that we are sure of, that we are going to have links for which we will be creating documents inside of any collection that we will think of. So the link document that the user creates, it's going to have certain fields which we already know. It's going to have the name, the long URL, and the shortcode, the created at, and the total clicks. So these are a few things that each link document are going to have. These are the few fields. So now the thing is that each link document needs to have a connection with the user which created it. So for this, we have to think of how exactly can we structure the document. We can obviously add in a field which says that created by, and for that field we can use the user UID, something like that. It's possible, but yeah, that's one way to do it. But what I've been thinking of, like lately, I've been kind of planning these things in like something which I've been doing in free time in order to figure out different ways. Now the first thing is, there are many different ways in which you can structure your database, in which you can save data inside your database. So you don't have to take this solution to be the only way. There are many different ways. It just depends how exactly do you want things to work. So what I've been thinking of is that we can have a collection of users within which we can have a document for each user, and for the document ID we can use the user UID. It's a common pattern. It's something which like you'll see very common. Then inside the document we can have a sub collection of links within which we can add all the links that the user created, the same user. So this is how, this is one way in which we can structure the database. Now let's talk about, if we follow this approach, how can we get the document when the user tries to visit that shortcode. So for that we can use a query called collection group. So this query allows to query through all the collections with the same name. So if we use this query and if we pass in links in such a way, in this way we can query through all the collections, the sub collections inside of our database, which have the same name of which are links, the name. But we can obviously filter that out by adding in the where checks, where we can just get the respective document or documents, which I will be getting to in a second. We only want that specific document which has the short code equals to, this is something Firebase, Firestore specific, equals to the link that the user is trying to visit. like this is how we can do the query. Now that being said, the other thing is there are a few other things, like few trade-offs if we follow this approach. The first thing is, if we are following this approach, which means that the user from the client side, the user will be creating this document. They are going to create this document from the client side, which means that for the shortcode, for the shortcode, by the way, we will be using a third-party package called NanoID. If you have used UUID, it's pretty much the same. Comparatively, it's faster, but it does the same thing. It generates a randomly generated text, and we will be using that for the shortcode. The thing is that if this document is being created from the client side, from the user's end, it is possible that the user may modify the request and they may pass in their own shortcode, which can be the same one as of another link. And obviously we don't want that. We don't want two links to have the same shortcode. That's kind of like an odd behavior, and we don't really want that. So which means that we'll have to ensure that the shortcode is always unique. But the thing is, with Firebase, one second, can I change the color? Okay, I can. So the thing with Firestore is that we cannot, there is no rules as such, or to say, we will obviously be using security rules, as I said earlier, but inside of the security rules, we cannot run a query like this. Like, we cannot run this code, this query inside the security rules, where we can check that if the shortcode is already being used by a link, then we don't want to create that document. It's not possible. We cannot run queries inside the security rules. There are few queries, like few things which are actually provided, and let me just see. Firestore, Firebase exists, and get. These are the security rules. Well, I think my internet, okay, let's see. Seems like my internet is acting weird. Yep, this is the one. So when we will be adding the security rules, which we will obviously be doing in order to ensure that we impose certain restrictions. So inside the security rules, there are two functions. The first is get and the other one is exists, which actually allows you to get a document or to check whether a document exists inside the database, and accordingly you can decide whether or not you want that action to happen, whether the user is trying to create a document or they are trying to update. There are different actions that we will be getting to. So that being said, let's get back. So we need to ensure that the shortcode is unique, but if we follow this approach, I don't think just following this alone, we won't be able to do that. So we'll have to figure out a different way. So I think, as you know that I'm kind of thinking on fly right now, I think what we can do is we can shift the entire process of creating the links to the cloud functions. So cloud functions are your code on the server, which means that you can run all the secure things that you want to do. It's your serverless functions. You don't need to have server in order to deploy functions. It's something which is kind of it's a service provided by Firebase. We will be getting to that. Anyway, we can shift the entire thing to the server, where the user just provides the links, the name and the long URL. The rest of the fields are they are added on the server, on the cloud function. So yeah, that's one way in which we can do this. And the other thing is that when the user visits the link, which means that when any user, they visit the shortened link, something like this, when they visit it, and if we query the document in such a way, it's going to retrieve the entire document completely, out of which maybe we just need the long URL. Maybe we don't need the rest of the fields, but it's not possible to partially retrieve a document. You either get the entire thing or you don't get nothing. So if we follow this approach, and if any user retrieves the document in such a way, they're going to see all the fields. Maybe we may not show them on the UI, but they will be getting the entire thing on the front end. So, well, in this case, I don't think we have any sort of sensitive information in this document, except the total clicks. It is something which maybe users, like, they don't appreciate being exposed to any user out there. So for our case, I think to make things interesting, I will be thinking of a solution to restrict the access to this field, for which maybe we can shift this thing into a private collection. That's again a different way to ensure that the certain field, certain information is not exposed. So yeah, that's one way in which we can do this. All right. So I think I'll have to think about it, and let's see then.